I am Iron Man.
Iron Man 2008, directed by Jon Favreau and starring Robert Downey Jr., was a massive gamble for Marvel Studios that shaped the way that we view the movie industry nowadays with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's really, really crazy, some of the behind-the-scenes facts of this movie, and we're going to go through that today. We're looking back, starting at the beginning of the MCU, and this is part of a new series that I'm doing. I'm going to go back through all of the original MCU movies, all the way from Iron Man to Endgame and Far From Home. Join me on this journey. We're going to walk down nostalgia lane, baby, and they're a huge part of my childhood. They really shaped, my growing up, and I'm sure they hold some fond memories for all of you. So rewatch these with me. It's really a fun experience. Talk about my thoughts, talk through the movie, break it down, and let me know what you think down below in the comments as well, always. But hey guys, it's me, Eli. It's been a while, man. It's been a little while since I've sat down and made a proper video like this, talking about a movie that's just for nerdy people like me. And I'm excited to be doing it again. We're going to be doing a new series. So I hope that you'll enjoy and you'll stick around for it. It's going to be fun. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Iron Man. It still holds up really, really well, in my opinion. I think this is a great opportunity to look back. It's always fun to go back to these early days of Marvel when we didn't have so much pressure of the multiverse or this broader, universe of characters all inhabiting it and stuff like that. Like, this movie really holds up well, and I think it's still one of the best in the MCU. And this is such a strong start to this universe that nobody had any idea would be so successful and become what it is today. I mean, it was such a gamble, like such a gamble. It was basically an independent movie. There were no foreign buyers that wanted to pick up the film because it didn't seem profitable. The lead star, Robert Downey Jr., had been on probation 2 years before that and had basically been known as the guy who was always on drugs, and he was not a choice that anybody wanted for the leading man of a new superhero movie that could potentially be launching a multitude of superhero movies. Nobody expected this thing to be as successful as it was. It's really, really impressive. Kevin Feige wanted to adapt this character for the modern age. There was original talks of making it a period piece, since Iron Man was a character that's been around for a while, back when the Vietnam War was going on, and then they adapted the idea of making it set in the present to where it could be more timely towards the politics of today. Because all of the writers and Kevin Feige who were involved look at this character who was not very popular at this time. Iron Man was a B-list superhero. Not very many people knew who Iron Man was, which is weird to think about because nowadays we all know who the character is because of Robert Downey Jr.'s iconic performance. But Kevin Feige, the writers, they looked at this character and they said, this is a man with flaws. This giant, extravagant character who's a billionaire weapons manufacturer whose successes are undermined by his own personal demons that he's battling with. And they said, hey, let's make that and let's adapt that for the modern age and tell that story. And it's really, really interesting that there was really no script for this movie. That's been well documented. Jeff Bridges, who plays Obadiah Stane, he said that he basically viewed it as a student film as they were making it because he couldn't comprehend the fact that this was a big budget blockbuster that was going to release because it was so unethical the way that they filmed it. I mean, they were writing scenes the day of. They'd be like, okay, we're ready to shoot. Then they'd rush into the trailer and write out the scene and try to figure out what was going to go on. Marvel Studios was against Robert Downey Jr. even playing the part. Their lead man for Iron Man, Jon Favreau, was convinced. He said, if it's not going to be Robert Downey Jr., it's going to be me. The higher-ups in New York said no. Even after making him submit an audition tape, they said, yeah, that's too much of a gamble. And so then Jon Favreau leaked that Robert Downey Jr. was going to play Iron Man online, and after the overwhelming response from the fans, Marvel Studios had to say yes, and then Robert Downey Jr. became Iron Man.
I am Iron Man.
Which is iconic and historic, and it's just incredible. He's kind of the poster boy for this kind of character, someone who struggles with inner demons and fights to overcome them to become a hero of sorts, right? And I love this movie so much. It's just, you go back and it's so nostalgic. You're looking at just a point in history when superhero blockbusters had already basically been a thing. I mean, since Christopher Reeve's Superman, then you had Spider-Man, Blade, X-Men has already been a thing. So the superhero blockbuster was already kind of an idea that people knew about, but it was revolutionary in the sense of a character that wasn't super popular that then became cemented in history. Our first introduction to Tony Stark is him holding a drink. He's sitting in the military convoy with these other soldiers, and they know who he is. They obviously can see that he's a prominent, important figure. One of them asks for a picture, and he kind of starts flirting with the driver a little bit too. Tony Stark is a powerful man. We can see that in this scene. He says,
yeah, peace. I love peace. I'll be out of a job with peace.
He's currently, very self-centered. We can see that. But the way that Robert Downey Jr. plays him is really great with the way he plays him with this charisma and this charm that really, he's not super unlikable. He's definitely self-centered and egotistical, but it's in a very fun and charming way. So that's why he was such the perfect part to play this role, right? And then we get a bomb that destroys the vehicle. The soldiers go out and this scene plays out. And then Tony Stark gets blown up by a weapon, a bomb that reads Stark Industries on it. And then we get to the Apogee Award that Tony Stark wins but is not present for because he's gambling. Another introduction to what kind of person he is. He's egocentric. He playfully gives his award away to someone else randomly because he doesn't care about it. Later, when he's doing the demonstration for the Jericho weapon, Tony says this.
Is it better to be feared or respected? And I say, is it too much to ask for both?
At this point in his life, as we can see in these early scenes, he's neither. He's neither feared nor respected as a person, because people know that although he manufactures these incredible weapons that can obliterate tons of people with ease, he is not the type of person that is to be respected or feared in any capacity because he doesn't value his legacy. His father built this enormous company, and Tony Stark is a genius. He's on the cutting edge of technology and weapons manufacturing. But he doesn't value any of that. He doesn't think about how his legacy is being viewed by others. We kind of get that with Christine Everhart, who asks what he thinks of the name Merchant of Death. And Tony recites this, pre-rehearsed speech that he says he recites in front of the mirror every night. He's late for his flight. He doesn't value his time. He's just living it up, and he doesn't care what happens to him. He's not feared or respected. But he demonstrates his new weapon, the Jericho weapon, and it's a roaring success, as he obviously expected that it would be. And then we're back to the present. This catastrophic event happens that changes his life forever. He's captured by powerful enemies who want to use his weapons against him and want to learn how he made them so they can use them for their own devices. But these angry men, the 10 Rings, who the Mandarin was deliberately left out of this movie just because the writers thought it was based on racial stereotypes that were kind of outdated, and they didn't want to include the specific character of the Mandarin in the movie. But his organization, the 10 Rings, the terrorist organization, is present in the movie, and they want to use Tony's weapons. This is his legacy. Whether he likes it or not, or whether he cares about it or not, the legacy that he has built as the Merchant of Death, the guy with the bigger stick, this is what he will go down as. And if he dies in this situation, that's what he'll be left as in eternity, cemented in history as the Merchant of Death. But this is where he meets Jensen in his cave. And Jensen is the perfect antithesis to Tony in this situation as a selfless man. He does good for Tony. He's not someone who's necessarily on Tony's side, but he saves his life. Jensen built a magnet and plants it into Tony's chest that's keeping the shrapnel embedded in his body from reaching his heart. But as Tony agrees to start working on his weapon, he, using his brilliant mind, starts to devise his own plan to escape. He starts building a new arc reactor, one that's going to power a suit to get him out of there. But as he's making this, we learn as he's getting closer to Jensen that Jensen has a family, or so he says. And he says that Tony is the man who has everything, and yet nothing. Tony has so much, and Jensen doesn't seem to be a man of any kind of power whatsoever, just a genius. Not on the same level as Tony, as he's a billionaire and he has everything that he could ever want. But Jensen has nothing, and yet everything, because he has peace. Tony says that he'd be out of a job with peace. And he means that even in the sense that if world peace were accomplished, then he'd be not able to manufacture weapons anymore. But also, he has no peace within himself at this moment. But Tony decides that it's time to escape, and he finishes his suit, and in the process, Jensen sacrifices himself to initiate their plan for Tony to escape, which kind of sets up how Tony is going to sacrifice himself for the greater good later. This is the first example, really, of Tony seeing someone, lay down their life for him, someone who's really devoted to him, even though he did nothing to earn their devotion. And this is enough to kind of get Tony to change his worldview. This is how he decides to stop manufacturing weapons. Totally flips his world upside down. But this scene is really cool. I like the way this was all done, the relationship between Jensen and Tony. The plot is well structured. I mean, it moves, at a good pace, and the way it all plays out is just... I am shocked that there was barely any script for this. They said they were just writing it on the wall and stuff, and they didn't have a script. It's crazy because the scenes play out so well. The action sequence where he escapes from the cave, it's very well done. The way he progresses and he attacks the guards and escapes, it's very entertaining and very fun to watch, and I love it. It's just crazy that it was the script was not really existent. But Jensen says,
"Don't waste your life."
And Tony burns all of his weapons that have been captured by the enemy, and he flies away. Tony is rescued. Robert Downey Jr.'s kind of struggle with substance was ended on a trip to Burger King, which is referenced in this scene where Tony says,
I want an American cheeseburger.
And he actually has a total of 3 throughout the scene, which is pretty funny. But he announces at this press conference, at the surprise of everyone, including specifically Obadiah Stane, that he's shutting down the weapons division of Stark Industries.
Effective immediately, I am shutting down the weapons manufacturer division of Stark International.
Now, the thing with this movie is that I think it's been a little while since I've seen Iron Man, and I was younger when I saw it. So the way that this all kind of plays out and the ramifications of it, I didn't really think about before. How the company of Stark Industries is kind of in danger of going under throughout a good bit of this movie, and how much Tony's, forced to stay in hiding because people don't want him out in public, or specifically Obadiah Stane, so he can kind of manipulate things behind his back. There's just a lot that goes into it that I think is really well done, and the way that it plays out. There was one word that Jon Favreau wrote on his whiteboard when he was writing down ideas for this movie, and that word was plausible. And even though it's a man in a suit of armor who can fly and shoot weapons out of his armor and stuff, maybe isn't the most plausible, but it is grounded in this sense of reality. It feels like this is something that's a world that's real and it's lived in, and there's characters in it who feel like real people. So it is really, really good and well done. I love it. Also, the other thing about this that we haven't mentioned is Pepper, who is Tony's assistant, who is kind of, one of the people in his life that's kind of there enabling him, like Rhodey and his driver, Happy. They're all just kind of there and just letting him do what he wants. And then now they're kind of worried about him now that he's actually come to a sense of maybe somewhat morality even. Tony tries to show Obadiah that the arc reactor technology works, and he shows him because he has one in his chest. He perfected it, and he needs Pepper to change the wire. This is one of those scenes that's like maybe you could see where it was kind of improv, maybe there's a lot of improv involved in this scene. The way it plays out is very naturally done, and it's a really funny scene, and it kind of grows the chemistry that you see in the relationship between Tony and Pepper. It's just really well done. I love this movie. I really do. Then Tony decides to start building a new suit of armor. It's something that he's going to work on in secret. And as we can see, our first inklings of kind of where Obadiah might be not all who he seems to be is kind of locking Tony out of the company, and he tells him to stay quiet. But we get Tony testing out his armor, which is some really fun scenes with Dummy the robot, who's iconic now, and we get our introductions to Jarvis as well. And we get Tony's first flight, which is a really cool scene as well. And we learn about the freezing mechanism, which is then, completed and called back and tied in later as we wrap up the movie in a way to slow down Obadiah Stane, which is great. Pepper decides to keep his old arc reactor and puts it in the proof that Tony Stark has a heart. Which now that after we've all seen Endgame, it's going to be crazy when we get there. But Tony builds his suit, and he decides to go to the red carpet event that Obadiah Stane told him not to go to. And we get our first ever in the MCU appearance of the one and only Stan Lee. R.I.P. man, he was great. I like the scene where Tony dances with Pepper. We get the joke about his social security number, and their relationship just feels very organic in the way that they fall in love. It's nice. It's a nice story, and it's I love the way it plays out. Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper is great. Robert Downey Jr. is obviously amazing. He's amazing in every scene in this movie. He really is a powerhouse, but she is too, and they really match up nicely. The way they dance is very nice, and their relationship is very organic, and it feels very nice. And this is where Christine Everhart appears and lets him know that his weapons are being used in the wrong hands. Again, Tony has genius. He has brilliance, mind, his power, and his influence, but none of it is valuable because he's not responsible. So he's let all of this get away from him, and now people are abusing his mind and his weapons and his technology in ways that he's not in control of. So he decides to take matters into his own hands. And this is where we learn that Obadiah Stane was the one who sold Tony's weapons to the Ten Rings, and he is the one who's trying to steal Tony's company. Which maybe is a little, predictable. You can see. I mean, I've already seen the movie, but when I rewatched it, was like, yeah, you can see where that's where that's going. But it does make sense, and it's kind of fitting with this theme of people fighting for power and wanting to build their legacy in these power-hungry people, and how Tony Stark has to be the one to rise above all that. How is he any different from Obadiah Stane? Is he gonna be the one to make the right decisions and to take control of his company and push it in a direction that's right and morally acceptable? It's these themes of power and influence and legacy and technology. And the fight for influence is just really, really cool. It's great, and I love the way it all plays out in the movie. And then Iron Man goes on a rampage fighting the terrorists. He takes down the Ten Rings and decides to take matters into his own hands to fight for justice. And this is a cool scene where Iron Man takes down the Ten Rings. He goes after the men and saves people. It's great. I love this scene. And the VFX, again, are really, really good, especially for 2008. They look great. The Iron Man suit looks tactile, looks realistic, and it looks believable. It looks plausible, like Jon Favreau wrote down. And Tony's kind of ominous energy that he brings is cool as well. His voice is kind of distorted, and the presence that Tony brings as Iron Man. He's a formidable threat. And it's really, really cool. And then Tony has a little run-in with the military, and he saves one of their lives as well after this little tussle. And this scene is very cool as well, as we see Iron Man, learning to test out his powers, and the military not really knowing what to do with him. Tony wants Pepper to hack into the system files and find out who dealt to the terrorists and look through Obadiah's files. And he says,
I shouldn't be alive. Unless it was for a reason.
This interaction with Jensen really changed his worldview, and one sacrifice from Jensen led to changing Tony's worldview to make the sacrifice for everyone, as we're going to see in Endgame. His arc starts off so perfectly here, as we see him as this egocentric guy who's full of himself, doesn't value anything that he has, even though he has a lot of things that to most people would be of much value. And he is just obsessed with himself, and he doesn't care. He doesn't value his legacy. He doesn't value his technology and his brilliance and his mind and his power. He takes it all for granted. And then we see him slowly go towards the man who makes the ultimate sacrifice. It's just great. This is why this original MCU era was just perfect. So after some convincing, Pepper agrees to hack into the system. And the scene where Tony convinces her to hack in is really great because it shows their relationship, and it shows how Tony really believes in what he's doing. He says, I know in my heart that is right. And Pepper is thinking that he's kind of crazy here. Like, she doesn't understand this new Tony that came back from Afghanistan. And Tony really pleads with her. And then we can see kind of their relationship evolve there. And then Obadiah sees that Pepper hacked in, and he gets upset. And in turn breaks into Tony's house. And he says to Tony,
this is your legacy.
Technology that's to be stolen by someone who should not have it, right? Because Tony doesn't value it at all. But we're going to see that Tony is going to step up and really take control of his legacy, the one that he is in charge of ultimately, not anyone else, especially not Obadiah Stane, who thinks that he can just influence Tony and manipulate him to get the power and influence that he wants. But thanks to Pepper, Tony switches out his arc reactor, and then Obadiah powers up the Ironmonger. As we head into this third act battle here, I think it's really nicely done. And it turns out that even we're in a position where maybe Tony does have to make a sacrifice. Of course he doesn't, because superhero movies weren't killing their main character yet at this point in time, right? And they wanted to continue. But it is a really interesting final battle, and it's one that works for the stakes in the story, and it really ties up nicely. You know, it's a little freeing to not have the weight and the pressure of a grander cinematic universe on it, but it really, you know, has the stakes that fit the world that is set up, and it all pays off really nicely, and the stakes and the emotional parts of it really tie in together. But we get everybody all hands on deck. Pepper helping out. We have Rhodey calling off the military from this little tussle that's happening. Pepper blows up the arc reactor, killing the Ironmonger, and the good guys win, which is a really nice feeling. And throughout this movie, we have Phil Coulson, who's trying to get in touch with Pepper and Tony as well, which is kind of setting up S.H.I.E.L.D. And I like how they kind of left that in the background because, again, they didn't know if they were going to make more. So it is kind of a nice little joke that does get paid off in the post-credit scene, which was the first Marvel post-credit scene, I believe. One that really mattered and set up the future. But after the final battle, which plays out really nicely, and I love the way it all kind of ties together, we get possibly the most pivotal scene in the entire MCU, and that is Tony revealing that he is Iron Man. And yes, like I've been saying multiple times the whole video, there was not very much script for this movie, and this scene was in fact improvised. On the spot, Robert Downey Jr. came up with the idea to have the famous line, "I am Iron Man," be in the movie. The original plan was not to have Tony reveal his identity because in the comics he doesn't, at least for a while, and Robert Downey Jr. thought, why not have him reveal it? This version is different, and Kevin Feige and Jon Favreau all thought it was a good way to distinguish this version of Iron Man from the version of the comics, and it would be an interesting way to kind of have it play out in the next movies. Robert Downey Jr. decided this was part of this version of the character, and that famous line, "I am Iron Man," was, in fact, improvised.
I am Iron Man.
But that's how we end the movie, and we're left to wonder how it's going to continue until we get our post-credit scene with Nick Fury and Tony Stark.
I am Iron Man. You think you're the only superhero in the world?
Now, the idea of the post-credit scene was that Kevin Feige said it's a setup, you know, for more, the Avengers Initiative. It's something that the hardcore fans are really going to like, but it's something that maybe will leave the main audience confused. So we just said, let's put it after the credits so that it's not taking away or distracting from the movie. We can end on a high note with "I am Iron Man," and then kind of for the fans that really hardcore and want to see more, they can stay to the end, and then they'll hear the Avengers Initiative post-credit scene. So that's kind of how it works nowadays too, except it's kind of gotten to the point where every movie that I see in the theater now, I kind of am like, is there a post-credit scene? Because it really has become a thing. But it's really cool. And it's revolutionary. So, Iron Man, 2008. It's a classic, man. And watching it back, it was really, really cool. It's a really cool experience. I invite you on this series that I'm going to be doing, where we're going to be going back through the original MCU movies. Watch these movies with me, man. They're really cool, and it's really fun to look back. If you're a Marvel fan, you probably watch them on the regular, man, but it's really cool to go back through. We're going to be going through in release order, by the way, too, not chronological order. Otherwise, we'd be starting with Captain America: The First Avenger, I believe. It's going to be fun. I'm excited about it. Old MCU, the good old days, man. They're all great, and there's things that you miss, you know, when you don't see them. I don't see these very often. I'm not a huge rewatcher, so it's going to be fun. Next up is The Incredible Hulk, I believe, so that's going to be fun. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you maybe learned something or thought about something differently that you didn't notice about Iron Man. Or if you had fun thinking about it again, and maybe you can rewatch it now that you've seen this video. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. It's good to be back, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope that you'll subscribe to continue to keep up with my content. I'm hoping to be posting more content this year. We're gonna kick things into full swing, you know. So thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, I guess, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.